Jerusalem. After 27 years of sitting out decisions on who should lead Israel, Arab lawmakers said on Sunday that they would recommend that Benny Gantz, the centrist former army chief, be given the first chance to form a government over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a watershed assertion of political power. Ayman Odeh, the leader of the Arab Joint List, wrote in a New York Times op-ed published on Sunday that the alliance's 13 incoming lawmakers, the third largest faction in the newly elected parliament, had decided to recommend Mr. Gantz because it would create the majority needed to prevent another term for Mr. Netanyahu. It should be the end of his political career, Mr. Odeh wrote. The Arab lawmakers' recommendation, which members of the Joint List were to deliver to President Reuven Rivlin in a face-to-face meeting Sunday evening, reflected Arab citizens' impatience to integrate more fully into Israeli society and to have their concerns be given greater weight by Israeli lawmakers. It was also a striking act of comeuppance for Mr. Netanyahu, who for years had rallied his right-wing supporters by inflaming anti-Arab sentiments. Before the September 17 election, he accused Arab politicians of trying to steal the election and at one point accused them of wanting to destroy us all. Israeli Arabs have chosen to reject Benjamin Netanyahu, his politics of fear and hate, and the inequality and division he advanced for the past decade, Mr. Odeh wrote in the op-ed for The Times. Still, Mr. Odeh wrote that the Joint List would not enter a government led by Mr. Gantz because he had not agreed to embrace its entire equality agenda, fighting violent crime in Arab cities, changing housing and planning laws to treat Arab and Jewish neighborhoods the same, improving Arabs' access to hospitals, increasing pensions, preventing violence against women, incorporating Arab villages that lack water and electricity, resuming peace talks with the Palestinians and repealing the law passed last year that declared Israel the nation-state only of the Jewish people. The last time that Arab lawmakers recommended a prime minister was in 1992, when two Arab parties with a total of 5 seats in parliament recommended Yitzhak Rabin, though they did not join his government. We have decided to demonstrate that Arab Palestinian citizens can no longer be rejected or ignored, Mr. Odeh wrote. In the 1992 election, Mr. Rabin initially held a narrow majority in the 120-seat Knesset even without the Arab Party's support, though he came to rely on it a year later after Shas, an ultra-Orthodox party, quit the government when Mr. Rabin signed the Oslo Peace Accords. Mr. Odeh wrote that the decision to support Mr. Gantz was meant as a clear message that the only future for this country is a shared future, and there is no shared future without the full and equal participation of Palestinian citizens. Mr. Gantz narrowly edged the Prime Minister in the national election on Tuesday. Afterward, both candidates called for unity, but differed on how to achieve it. The former army chief appears to lack a 61-seat majority even with the Arab Joint List's support. He emerged from the election with 57 seats, including those of allies on the left and the Joint List, compared with 55 seats for Mr. Netanyahu and his right-wing allies. Avigdor Lieberman, leader of the secular, right-wing Yisrael Beiteinu party, which won 8 seats, is in the position to be a kingmaker, but said on Sunday that he would not recommend any candidate. He said that Mr. Odeh and the Joint List were not merely political opponents, but the enemy and belonged in the parliament in Ramallah, not in the Knesset. Mr. Rivlin began hearing the recommendations of each major party Sunday evening and was to finish on Monday, before entrusting the task of forming a government to whichever candidate he believes has the best chance of being successful. In remarks at the start of that process, Mr. Rivlin said that the Israeli public wanted a unity government including both Mr. Gantz's blue and white party and Mr. Netanyahu's Likud.